Welcome back. Today we're continuing our series on Bobby Fischer's 60 memorable games. Fischer, of course, the legendary American Grandmaster and the 11th World Chess Champion. And this is his game collection in his own words. If you'd like to add this book to your chess library, you can use the link in the description below. And not only will you gain access to one of the finest chess books ever written, but you can help support the channel as you do so. So in this game, we've got Fischer with the white pieces up against Bent Larsen from Denmark. Now in the 1960s and 1970s, Larsen was one of the strongest players in the world, especially outside of the Soviet Union. It was really only Larsen and Bobby Fischer himself who were considered serious threats to the World Chess Championship outside of the USSR. Now, Larsen never got the chance to challenge for the world title, but he was always around the mark and a very dangerous attacking player. And of course, so was Fischer. So we're going to see in this game what happens when two attacking, energetic players meet at the chessboard. It's worth noting, though, that in this game, both of these men are still quite young. The year is 1958. So Fischer's still only 15 years old, and Larsen is a young man too. He's only 23. So a lot of their careers still lay ahead of them in this encounter. But a very aggressive game. I'm going to put a quote up from Bent Larsen, which I think gives a bit of a measure of the man. "Most of all, I like bad lines. That is, those considered bad, in my opinion, unjustly, by theory." So what we're going to see is the dragon variation of the Sicilian defense, a famously attacking opening for black, and one which Bobby Fischer doesn't have a lot of respect for. At different stages, he's saying, oh, well, white's attack plays itself, and in the comments at the start of the chapter, it's saying that this game was one of the games which helped destroy the dragon's reputation. But it's still very double-edged. It's still played a great deal at club level, and even some master level players employ the dragon from time to time. So let's get into it. Fischer with the white pieces starts off with e4. We get a Sicilian, and Fischer goes for the open Sicilian with a quick d4. Captures in the center, and then g6. This is the defining move of the dragon variation. Just a side note here, this pawn formation for black is what gave the dragon variation its name, because apparently it looks like the Draco star constellation. I'll put that up on the screen too, so that you can compare them side by side. I always think with these star constellations that they don't really look like the thing that they're named after. I mean, does that look like a dragon to you? Not sure. But anyway, that's the story behind the opening name. So black's not going to fianchetto their dark squared bishop, obviously, and white goes for the most aggressive setup. Now it's worth pointing out here, for anyone new to the dragon, that black cannot play knight g4 to annoy the white bishop, because white's got the riposte bishop b5 check, which wins material in all lines. The king doesn't have a square that it can move to, so black has to block the check. Blocking with the knight fails because the other knight drops. Blocking with the knight this way doesn't work either, because after capturing on c6, the rook and the king are forked at the end. And the most natural way of blocking the check, bishop d7, doesn't work either, because, again, white can simply take the knight. This bishop is pinned in front of the black king. So white's won a piece. So instead, black just develops, preparing for kingside castling. f3. Knight g4 was a bit annoying if white didn't stop it then, so f3 prevents that move. Black castles, and white goes queen d2. What we're going to see is white castling queenside, black's gone kingside, so we're going to see pawn storms on opposite wings, an attacking game, a real dogfight. Now, this is actually called the Yugoslav attack, this way of white playing against the dragon. And I think this is quite fun because this game was actually played in a town called Poteroz, which is modern-day Slovenia, but back in 1958 it was part of Yugoslavia. So we've got a Yugoslav attack in Yugoslavia. Black develops with knight c6, and white's got a few ways of continuing here. If white castles straight away, the problem with this is that black can now play d5. And this is the move that black often wants to play in the Sicilian, and Fischer didn't want to allow this. So instead of castling immediately, he plays bishop to c4, which stops the d5 break. There's a capture in the centre, and then black plays bishop e6. And this is a move which I think deserves a bit of explanation, because why is black willing to allow this damage to their pawn structure after capturing on e6? I mean, these double pawns may look ugly, but the reason that black is prepared to go for this is that it opens up the f-file, and it can also help black to play d5 at some future moment. I mean, just to put a few moves on the board, let's say that white castles queenside, we get a natural move like rook c8, g4, starting the pawn storm, queen a5, black's attacking as well, king b1, and then after knight to d7, this pawn on f3 can be a target for black to attack, thanks to the f-file opening up. It's all quite deep, I know, but these grandmasters know all of this stuff, and for this reason, after bishop e6, we got just the retreat, bishop b3. So Larsen gets his queen into an aggressive position, anticipating that Fischer's going to castle queenside, which he does, and then we get b5. So Larsen is starting the queenside pawn storm, and Fischer plays the move king b1. And I thought this was an interesting moment, because while it is true that king b1 is often a useful move, like the king is a bit more secure on b1 than it is on c1. If it's on c1, then this dark squared diagonal can sometimes become a problem. And on b1, the king also defends a2. But in these opposite side castle positions, the other important principle is that you can't afford to be slow, and that every tempo matters. So I was wondering, what would happen if white had instead started the pawn storm on the king side immediately, without king b1? Wouldn't that just accelerate the attack? Well, the thing in chess is that every position is different, and these general principles need to be backed up with calculation. So the problem, if white had played, for example, h4, starting the kingside pawn storm, then black could play bishop takes b3. If white were to recapture with the a-pawn, then black's queen enters, and the knight has to go very passive to defend it. So that's no good. But if you recapture with the c-pawn, then black's got the important move b4, pushing this important defensive knight away. If you play the move that Fischer played in the game, knight d5, then white's going to be lost after chopping that knight off and then taking on a2. The queen guards the b1 square, and you can't really stop rook c8 next. So yeah, white is toast here. No way back after a blunder like that. So after b4, you've really got to play the knight to a4. But in this case, the knight is out of the game. Yes, it's blocking the a-file, but this knight is actually quite important to take off an important black defensive piece around the black king side, as we'll see, right? Like, we want to be able to trade some of the pieces which are defending the black king, and the knight over here is not doing any job of that. So, king b1. Black goes ahead and plays b4 anyway, and because we've got the a2 pawn safely guarded, Fischer does have time to play knight to d5, and Larsen captures with the bishop. Okay, so it's also important to look at, well, what if you take with the knight? Why would you not want to do that? Well, in this case, you've got the quite thematic removal of the dark squared dragon bishop around the black king. So white doesn't recapture the knight, but instead captures this bishop. After the king takes and you take back, the bishop moves back, and this attack is going to be much stronger without the dark squared bishop around the black king. In the book, Fischer also recommended as an alternative to h4 that after bishop d7 you can play the rook to e1, attacking this pawn, which is also strong. I mean, it's quite hard for this pawn to move because, right, if it goes here, then you can take it. If you move it 2 squares, then you can take it again en passant. So this is going to be a target which black will have to defend passively. This is why in this position you take with the bishop instead. White captures back, and then we get an inaccuracy, rook a to c8. Now in the book, Fischer calls this the losing move, which I think is an exaggeration. It's not that black is lost here after a move like this, but it is definitely not correct to allow the white light squared bishop to survive. Black should have taken it, because as we'll see, this light squared bishop becomes both an important defensive piece and an important attacking piece. After taking back, it's, right, if we get the continuation which Fischer was going to go for in this case, then, well, it's still anyone's game, I think. We could get more trades and we could enter an equal-ish endgame, potentially. But, yeah, letting the bishop stay on the board was not the right idea, as we will see. Because after this, Fischer wastes no time in retreating it to safety, keeping it on b3, nice and secure. So what black really needs to do here is get their queenside pawn storm going, and that's going to require playing the a pawn down the board. You need to play a5, a4, and that's the way that black can cause the white king some problems. But it's actually not that easy to do in this position because, well, first of all, the queen is in the way of the a pawn, so you've got to move the queen. But if you move the queen, like let's say to b5, then white can actually just take this. And trying to make the argument that you can sacrifice the pawn in order to open the a file doesn't work, because white can just retreat the bishop out of harm's way, and there's absolutely no attack on the a file. For example, queen b5, this pawn is so well guarded by the bishop. Another reason why black should have taken this light squared bishop off the board when he had the chance. So you can't let that a pawn drop, and for this reason Larsen played the rather ugly and slow move rooks to c7. You never want to be playing moves like this when you've got opposite side castling and time is of the essence. The whole idea is that you're defending this pawn so that the queen can move, so that the pawn can move later. But, now Fischer gets his own pawn storm going. h4, here we go. Larsen continues with queen b5, with a5 to come next. But one move that you might consider, if you're black, is, well, why don't we stop that h-pawn in its tracks before it causes some trouble? But here it's quite instructive what white should do. White should sacrifice a pawn with the move g4. if black takes it, then you don't take back, but instead you actually continue with the h-pawn. Let's say that black keeps on taking material. Well, now black's king is clearly opening up, right? After these captures, yeah, black's gained some material, but after queen h2, there's going to be some pretty nasty threats on the h-file. I mean, white's got threats everywhere here. He can take this knight and then mate on h7. You could also consider bringing the rook over with this file. This pawn's very unstable. White is having all the fun in a position like this one. So for that reason, queen b5, black's just going to try and get his own play. He allows h5, which comes, and then we get rook to c8. Note though that the light squared bishop is defending the c2 pawn, so this bishop is a superstar defending a2 and c2, and really the only way that black is going to have any chance in this game is if he can get that bishop to move or to trade it off the board. He should have traded it off before, of course, but black needs to play a5, a4, because for the moment there's no threat on c2. I thought it was interesting here, like what if we had played a5 straight away? That looks like a improvement over rook to c8, doesn't it? But again, we have to remember that every position is different, and here white can play the quite counterintuitive move, I would say. The quite counterintuitive move, bishop takes f6. Normally white doesn't want to give up their dark squared bishop for that knight, but in this particular case it works. Let's see what happens. Black takes back, so this bishop looks strong, right? But now white can take on g6, can't take back with the f pawn because it's pinned, and if you take with the g pawn, then white plays queen h6, and the issue is that this rook is taking away the escape square from the king. White is threatening queen h7 mate, and if you try and create the escape square for the king now, then, well, that doesn't work because we've got this move. Again, that f pawn is pinned, and white has got checkmate on the next move. So this move, rook f to c8, is actually more about freeing the f8 square than creating a threat on the c file. I thought that was very interesting. So always question your rules of thumb when you're in positions like this one. I mean, in 95% of the cases, taking this knight with the bishop is wrong, but in this particular case, it does work. So now Fischer starts opening up the black king. H takes back, and g4. We want to get this knight to move so that we can weaken the king even further by capturing the important dragon bishop. So finally, after all that maneuvering, right, of rook c7 and queen b5, and then having to move the other rook here, finally Larsen is able to play a5, the move that he wanted to play many moves ago. And as Fischer points out in the text, Larsen needs just one more move to get his attack to land, but he doesn't have it. So Fischer continues with the plan, g5, and Larsen sticks the knight on h5, blocking the h-file. It's also interesting to look at what happens if black doesn't move the knight that's being attacked, but instead responds to the threat with a threat of his own, with a4. Now in positions like this, you have to calculate, and calculation will prove that the complications favour white here. It takes a few moves to show exactly why, but let's run through them. White should take, black takes the bishop, white takes this bishop, so white is up a piece, but it seems as though black is going to regain the material with interest after capturing on c2, right? The king and the rook are forked. Once the king moves, then you capture the rook. But here white can actually take this pawn. The point being, black cannot take back because rook h8 is actually checkmate. So very sharp, very double-edged, but to navigate your way through this mess of a position, you need to put your thinking cap on and spend some time looking at all of the lines and what happens. So instead what happened was we got knight h5, and here Fischer plays a very thematic exchange sacrifice. Rook takes h5. I gave this a double exclam, a brilliant move, but to be honest, it maybe doesn't deserve that. This is the first move that anyone playing with the white pieces against the dragon, who's got some experience, should look at. The thing is that that knight can't be allowed to stay on h5. White's attack depends on the h-file, so you've got to remove it, even if you've got to give up the exchange to do so. But, you know, it's still important to play this move. Actually, back here, after knight h5, just about any other move sees the advantage swing to black. Like another natural move here, let's just look at bishop takes g7 first. Well, after king takes g7, the same idea does not work, because now it's not the same. Black's king is a bit safer, as it turns out, on g7. We'll see why in a moment. White is just down an exchange here, and white's attack is not going to land. If you try and take advantage of the weakened dark squares, then queen d4 check is nicely met by queen e5, and again, white doesn't really have an attack. So you can't play positions like this based on general principles. You have to be very concrete. After rook takes h5, Larsen takes back. And remember I said before that I didn't think that Larsen's failure to capture the light squared bishop was really a losing mistake, as Fischer had said in the book. Well, this move here is the losing mistake, for sure. What should have been played instead is pretty hard to see, but actually you've got to forego capturing this rook and instead capture this bishop here. So if white tries to save their rook with a move like this, then the bishop can go back, and we've traded equal material. White still has some advantage, but it's nothing close to winning. If instead you take this bishop, if you take this bishop here, and then you take the rook, the idea is similar to what happened in the game, to play g6, and this pawn can't be taken due to the pin, right? But the defensive move, which Larsen missed, Fischer missed in the game, and Fischer also missed in the analysis, is a very computer-like defense, and that is to actually block with rook to c4, offering to give back the exchange in order to block this attack. Yeah, white could take this rook, of course, but remember, white gave up the exchange earlier, so that's not really giving white any advantage. You can capture here, but after the king takes, it turns out there's not really a good way to continue adding pressure. I mean, you might think of a move like this to go for the g7 square, but black's king can run away. And now, out of the pin, you really have to consider taking this rook, I think, otherwise you're just down material. So Not an easy move to see. That yeah, that rook c4 move is not straightforward, especially all the way back straight after the exchange sacrifice on h5. I mean, I think if this position was reached, then there's a good chance that Larsen would find it, but not easy at all to find such a move, not even for the best players in the world. But yeah, after taking on h5 without taking here first, now black really is lost, because this move g6 comes and there's no good way to defend. I mean, if you try the same thing, what happens then? Now it's a little bit different, because you've always got the chance of capturing here, and then once the king captures back, the king is much more in no man's land than it was before, right? It had the chance before in that other line we looked at of running away over here, but yeah, white is coming up with moves like rook g1, and you know, where does the king go? If here, then maybe here. There's a lot of threats coming here, so it does make a difference. So after g6, we instead see black try and block as many lines as he can with e5. So Fischer starts with pawn takes f7 check. You can't take this pawn with the king because it's guarded. So king f8 was played, and then bishop e3, simply moving out of the way. And then Larsen plays d5, giving Fischer one last chance to go wrong. Don't take the pawn with the bishop, because, oops, that allows rook takes c2. And then it's back to being anyone's game. So you've got to be careful right until the very end. Which Fischer was, of course. He didn't play that blunder. Instead, he correctly took the pawn with the e-pawn. E takes d5. And that led Larsen to capture the dangerous white pawn on f7. I was interested here to see what would happen if Larsen instead had played a4. The move that he was trying to play for the whole middle game, right? Like, finally, he gets the chance to play it. And it looks like, actually, that this white bishop is trapped. Okay, black's king is still in grave danger, but if black can be a piece up, then maybe black has enough play. And actually here, there's still only one move that allows white to keep the advantage. And that move is, can you see it? It's d6, responding to the threat with a bigger threat. You attack the rook. If we go for the critical line, capture, there's actually no real danger here. White's king can just step out of the way. This pawn acts as a shield. White can even look at playing queen d8 check, next move, giving up the queen and getting a new one once the pawn promotes. And if the rook moves, I mean, where does the rook even move to? It's unclear. Let's say it moves to b7. Well, now the bishop's got a square that it can move to, and it improves again with tempo. White's attack is landing first, but it does show that these positions can swing on a dime, right? I think a4 would have been a good try. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Fischer would have found d6 and probably even planned it in advance, but against a lesser player, you can put them into situations where there can be only one move, and if they don't find it, well, it's worth the gamble, isn't it? Because you were losing anyway. Instead we see rook takes f7, and now white's threats really come in like a series of punches designed to knock the opponent to the canvas and finish them off. We get d6, so introducing a threat on the rook. The rook moves, then bishop to g5, again hitting the rook. And at this point, Larsen gives up on trying to save the material. Fischer captures, and now Fischer isn't even material down. He's actually up a pawn and still has the attack. And look at all these open lines around the poor black king. We get d7, another move with tempo, trying to save the rook. And after queen d6, Larsen actually resigns here. Fischer was actually a bit self-critical in the final position, saying that queen h6 was more accurate because that would have led to a faster checkmate. If you block with the bishop, then this is checkmate. If you try to run with the king, then you go queen h7 check. Blocking with the bishop obviously won't work, and if you go king here, then that's checkmate. The final position with queen d6 still leads to checkmate, but it takes a few more moves. I mean, Fischer was a perfectionist. That's one of the things that made him a great player. So a win to Fischer with the white pieces and a blow against the reputation of the dragon variation. Hope you enjoyed that game. I mean, it was quite a fight, wasn't it? Many moments where white had to find an only move in order to keep the advantage, and Fischer was able to do so, and he earned the win as a result. So that's all for this game. I'll be continuing this series in the future, so do subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on the future episodes as we continue our journey through Fischer's 60 memorable games.